He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even flinch, but a serving royal guard just dragged Donald Trump into court in full ceremonial uniform, and what he handed the judge wasn't meant to exist. The folder? It vanished from Buckingham Palace the night of a state banquet. And it held evidence so damaging, Trump's entire legal team nearly walked out. Why did the guard break protocol? And what exactly did he reveal? That could crush a former president's career. Stick around to see what the judge unsealed. And before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed with the bell on so you don't miss what happens when tradition goes silent no more. The hush inside Courtroom One of the Old Bailey felt unnatural, like breath being held by the entire room. Oak-panelled walls lined with legal history seemed to close in around the crowd, members of the press, diplomats, government observers, and a dozen Queen's Counsels in tailored robes. At the centre stood a chair rarely occupied by anyone in red. Captain Rowan Ashford entered through the side door without flourish. He wore the full ceremonial scarlet tunic of the Coldstream Guards. A dark blue sash crossed his chest, medal ribbons catching just the faintest glint of the overhead brass lighting. His bearskin cap, regulation, black, tall, was tucked respectfully under his left arm. He did not bow. He did not scan the crowd. He walked with the quiet resolve of someone who had stood in place for hours while dignitaries passed by and not once blinked. Every camera clicked. The silence was broken only by the shifting of courtroom benches and the dry rustle of paper. A few American correspondents whispered his name, as if testing it for the first time. Ashford took the witness chair, adjusted nothing, sat without scraping. At the opposite table, Donald J. Trump sat among his legal team. His suit was crisp, his hair exact, but his hands betrayed a slow irritation, fingertips drumming against the polished oak surface. He did not look at Ashford directly, not yet. "Captain Ashford," said the judge, a woman with clear glasses and an even clearer tone, "you are aware of the historic nature of your presence here today." Ashford nodded once. "Yes, Your Honour." "No serving member of the Household Division has testified in a matter involving a foreign head of state, much less a former President of the United States. Are you prepared to proceed?" "I am, ma'am." The judge turned to the clerk. "The court will now hear testimony regarding the item marked Exhibit C, retrieved from the Buckingham Palace banquet hall on the evening of June the 4th. Trump's head tilted slightly at that. His lawyers began flipping through folders, lips tightening. The phrase Exhibit C seemed to ripple through the chamber like a sound no one expected. Ashford didn't move. He sat with both hands resting atop the bearskin in his lap, still as the marble busts that watched from above. Outside, rain gathered softly on the courthouse window. Inside, all waited for the first serving royal guard to speak. The gold was everywhere. From the thread in the table runners to the filigree around the ceiling's carved cornices, the grand ballroom at Buckingham Palace shimmered under the weight of history. Candles burned behind crystal sconces, casting a warm glow across a table set for 90. A harpist played softly from the gallery above. The evening's quiet elegance had been rehearsed to the second. Captain Rowan Ashford stood motionless, just beyond the archway of the reception chamber. His post was ceremonial, but his eyes missed nothing. He did not need to look to know the placement of the Queen's arms above the fireplace, or the exact timing of the silver service course. But tonight, something subtle pulled at his attention. Not loud, not immediate, but there all the same. President Trump had arrived nearly 30 minutes late. The convoy had paused longer than usual in the inner courtyard, and there had been hushed movement near the secure diplomatic corridor. Ashford noted it, logged it mentally, and remained still. From his vantage, he watched aides shuttle in and out of the reception chamber, some carrying annotated binders, others adjusting last-minute seating cards. And then he saw it, a slim grey folder, unmarked except for the faint outline of a faded royal cipher, half pulled from its corner like someone had tried to remove it. It passed from one aide to another, no clipboard, no log sheet. No glance at the steward stationed near the inventory table. The exchange took less than 5 seconds, but Ashford's attention froze on it as if time had slowed. The aide receiving it, A tall man in a dark suit with an American lapel pin tucked the folder beneath his arm and exited through the side vestibule leading to the private corridor. The corridor that led, discreetly, to the exit gate reserved for diplomatic vehicles. Ashford did not move. He was trained not to. But internally, a shift occurred, a slight turning of gears. Items bearing the royal cipher were not casually walked out of the palace, especially during a state banquet. A low chime rang out. The footman opened the double doors. Guests began filing from the reception area into the main ballroom. Trump entered, surrounded by aides and secretary, all chatter and charm. Ashford's expression did not change. He noted silently that the aide with the grey folder had not returned. As the national anthems began, the silence deepened. A sea of formalware rose to its feet. Trump stood next to the king, hand over heart, eyes straight ahead. The evening proceeded in faultless ritual, course after course, toast after toast, each gesture an echo of centuries-old tradition. But for Ashford, one thing lingered. A folder that no one logged, taken by a man who did not return. It wasn't his place to ask questions. The uniform demanded restraint, but something about the cipher, just faint enough to have been missed by anyone else, sat lodged in his mind like a note held unresolved. By the time the ballroom dimmed for the king's final address, the moment had passed. The room was applauding, cameras flashed, the press wrote of diplomatic warmth. Only Ashford remained still in the side chamber, eyes on the now empty vestibule door, recalling the folder and the man who had taken it through the corridor that wasn't meant to be used. Captain Rowan Ashford did not come from a military family. His father taught history at a grammar school nestled near the edge of Windermere. His mother once sang in the Carlisle Cathedral choir. Discipline in the Ashford home came not from shouting, but from precision. Books returned to the shelf, shoes placed neatly by the door, supper at 6 without fail. Rowan grew up surrounded by stories, not bedtime tales, but real ones, pages of empire, quiet revolts, monarchs who vanished from paintings after falling from favour. His father's study smelled of old paper and peat fire, and the boy often sat cross-legged on the rug, reading regimental dispatches from the Napoleonic Wars, or listening to choral recordings as he memorised the sequence of English kings. He studied history formally at King's College London, specialising in post-war diplomacy and ceremonial protocol. Professors noted his unusual combination of restraint and recall. He remembered everything, but he rarely spoke unless asked. It wasn't until a guided tour of Wellington Barracks in his final year that something stirred. The guardsmen in red tunics, still as statues, bearing the weight of spectacle and seriousness alike. He saw not pageantry, but purpose. He joined the Coldstream Guard soon after, declining a research scholarship to Oxford. His training instructors described him as steady to the point of eerie. He excelled not in speed or strength, but in composure. Where others cracked during inspections or drill rotations, Ashford stood unreadable. Over time, his path remained ceremonial, but never superficial. He led security operations during the King's Jubilee, navigated VIP lockdown drills during the brief London unrest of 2021, and helped coordinate the wreath-laying ceremony during the funeral of a former Prime Minister. When Cumbria flooded in 2020, his unit was reassigned for emergency logistics. While others shifted sandbags and managed civilians, Ashford was found rerouting relief schedules on a clipboard without a wrinkle on his uniform. He had no illusions about glory. His was a career of watching, recording, executing. Fellow officers often described him as old-fashioned. One colonel said, "If the palace walls had a voice, it'd sound like Captain Ashford." Yet beneath the polish, there was principle. His father's voice returned to him often, soft but firm. Tradition isn't about silence, it's about keeping things honest, even when no one's looking. Otherwise, it's just theatre. That line lingered like scripture. So when Ashford saw that unlogged folder tucked beneath a foreign aide's arm and disappearing into a corridor it had no business entering, he did not react outwardly. But he did not forget. He had served too long, seen too many moments polished into headlines, to believe everything sorted itself with time. Some things, quiet things, small things, had to be watched. And when the moment came, recorded. 3 days passed. The banquet had been declared a quiet success. Photographs of Trump toasting the king made the front pages. Headlines spoke of renewed bonds, dignified diplomacy, and a return to decorum. But inside the offices behind the marble hall, not everything had added up. Ashford learned of the first discrepancy by accident. He was passing through the logistics corridor at Buckingham Palace when he overheard 2 inventory officers murmuring over a clipboard. Something about a mismatch, an item missing from the ceremonial registry. A sealed folder listed on the pre-banquet intake, but nowhere in the outtake sheet. One officer assumed it was a clerical error. The other, more concerned, noted that the gift bore a royal cipher and had required logged custody. Neither of them noticed Ashford pause briefly, then move on. That evening, after his rotation, Ashford requested access to the ceremonial duty log, a request he was entitled to under routine report checks. He scanned the time block around the incident. The entry noted the arrival of the US delegation, the transfer of official gifts, and the rotation of steward staff. But nowhere was there mention of the grey folder he had seen pass from hand to hand. It wasn't curiosity that drove him next. It was procedure. He requested footage from the internal vestibule camera under the premise of checking for potential crowding violations during the banquet. The footage was short, barely 3 minutes, but there it was. The tall aide, with the American pin, folder pressed flat under his arm, disappearing down the side corridor. Ashford checked the corridor logs. Nothing. No exit registered under that man's name. No sign in, no sign out. Someone had walked a sealed item bearing the royal seal out of the palace during a state event, without escort, without record. Still, Ashford said nothing. Instead, he drafted a personal memorandum, not yet submitted, detailing the time, visual description, and deviation from protocol. He signed it, dated it, folded it in half, and slid it into a plain envelope. It wasn't meant for anyone yet. It was simply preserved. The next day, Ashford brought the matter, cautiously, to his superior officer, Lieutenant Colonel Mercer, a stiff man with medals arranged like punctuation. "I believe there may have been an unregistered removal during the banquet, sir," Ashford said plainly. "A folder, sealed, ciphered." Mercer glanced up from his desk slowly. "Was it your post to oversee diplomatic transfers?" "No, sir." "Did you log a breach at the time?" "No breach, sir. Only observation." Mercer paused. "Then I advise you, let this one pass. Some events," he said carefully, "move on tracks we're not cleared to walk." Ashford nodded once. That was the end of it, officially. Unofficially, he placed his signed note inside his private barracks safe, along with a printed copy of the corridor footage, time code, and a duplicate of the ceremonial shift log, circled at the hour when nothing and yet something had left the palace. He didn't speak of it again, not yet, but the folder that everyone else seemed to forget stayed sharp in his memory, because he knew enough about silence to recognize when it was too clean. The witness stand was framed by 2 Union Jacks and 1 muted royal crest above the judge's bench. It was not a place built for spectacle, and yet the atmosphere now hummed with tension, as though something immense were being unwrapped layer by layer. Captain Rowan Ashford sat with the same exactness he brought to state duties. His tunic remained buttoned high at the collar, medals aligned to the millimetre. He had removed his bearskin at the judge's request, and it now rested beside him, its dark fur catching the edge of a distant spotlight. The prosecutor, a Crown barrister, with a clipped tone and a barrister's black robe that looked almost too stiff, stepped forward with the precision of someone who knew he only needed to light a match. The rest would burn itself. "Captain Ashford," he began, "for the record, how long have you served with the Coldstream Guards?" 14 years, sir. "And in that time, how many state events at Buckingham Palace have you participated in?" "Over 60, including 5 state banquets." "On the evening of June the 4th, were you stationed at the reception chamber adjacent to the Grand Ballroom?" "I was." "Did you observe anything unusual during the movement of diplomatic aids and documents that evening?" A pause. Ashford's voice never changed tempo. "Yes." He then described it precisely: the time, the lighting, the angle from which he saw the slim grey folder. He explained how it passed from one aide to another, both American, and how the folder bore the faint royal cipher, partially obscured. No official logging, no return. "And you're certain it bore the cipher?" "I am." "Did you witness that aide return?" "I did not." From the gallery, there was the faint scrape of a pen being dropped, then silence again. The prosecutor gestured to a screen. A still image appeared, blurry but clear enough. The aide's silhouette, the folder underarm, the glint of seal. This image was extracted from the palace's vestibule corridor footage. "You confirm that is what you saw?" Ashford did not even blink. "Yes." The prosecutor turned slightly. No further questions at this time. Trump's lead counsel, a balding man with a wide jaw and a voice seasoned in televised hearings, rose slowly, pacing once before turning to Ashford with a smile so deliberate it almost cracked the air. "Captain Ashford," he began, emphasizing the word captain, "you've described what you saw with admirable confidence, but remind us, you are not a member of the intelligence services, you do not review foreign protocol, you are by profession a ceremonial soldier, yes?" "I am a guardsman, sir. My profession is protocol." Some in the gallery stirred. The lawyer continued, undeterred. "And yet, you've presented yourself here as an authority on diplomatic materials. Do you consider yourself qualified to interpret the purpose of what you observed?" Ashford's answer came without pause. "I did not interpret it, sir. I reported it." A faint echo followed the line. Not applause, not sound, just the subtle shift of a courtroom listening more closely. The lawyer narrowed his eyes. "You made assumptions about a folder during a fast-moving event. Isn't it true you could have misunderstood what you saw?" Ashford tilted his head slightly. "Not if I was trained to see." Trump's hand stilled its tapping on the desk. The lawyer opened his mouth again, but the judge held up a hand. "That's enough," she said firmly. "This court is not in the business of discrediting witnesses based on uniform alone." Ashford said nothing more. He did not need to. He had entered the courtroom not to accuse, but to clarify. And now, with every word on record, the folder was no longer just a memory. It was Exhibit C. The barracks at Wellington were silent after midnight. Most nights, the guards' quarters near Birdcage Walk hummed faintly with quiet television sets, the creak of boots in narrow hallways, or the low drone of a drill sergeant's voice echoing from a duty room. But tonight, there was only stillness, save for the occasional metallic groan of rain guttering down the side of the old stone walls. Captain Rowan Ashford sat alone in the reading room, still in his uniform shirt, cuffs unbuttoned but tucked, his red tunic folded neatly across the arm of a nearby chair. His eyes hadn't moved from the envelope on the table in front of him. Inside, his memorandum, a printed screenshot, 2 photocopies of duty logs, not accusations, only observations, but observations with implications large enough to make history and shake it. He'd kept it sealed for a week of rehearsals, processions, and uniform inspections, a week of trying not to see the slight glances of press aides whispering near the palace wings, a week of noticing that the aide who took the grey folder hadn't been seen again, not at any diplomatic reception, not listed in any follow-up briefings. A ghost now. That morning, a friend in administrative records had passed him a note over coffee. "Ashford, no idea how it got flagged, but something matching your corridor log was couriered to a private residence in Florida, off books, quietly cleared." No further details, just that. The king's advisers had not been consulted. The royal cipher had not been relogged. Whatever that folder was, it had left British soil under the table. Ashford had placed the note in his breast pocket and carried on with the morning's drill. But all day, a pressure built, not loud but constant. It felt like standing guard during a downpour and knowing one drop had landed where it should not. Now, hours later, the barracks asleep, Ashford stood and slipped the envelope into his inner tunic pocket. He left the reading room and walked the long corridor toward the guards' chapel. The rain had stopped, but the windows still fogged in patches, glowing from the lamplight outside. He stepped inside. Empty pews, stone floor cold beneath his boots, flags from battles long faded hung above him. He sat at the back, not to pray, but to breathe, to remember his father's voice, quiet, unshakable. We don't protect history by ignoring it. We protect it by being honest about what threatens it. Ashford rose without ceremony. The next morning he submitted the envelope to the Crown Prosecution Service through a legal intermediary. No announcement, no press, just a sealed packet with his name, service number, and a single line of explanation. Observed deviation from ceremonial protocol involving protected royal property during state function. And just like that, the guards had broken their silence. Not for politics, not for pride, for protocol, and for the truth buried beneath it. The courtroom was different now. Where earlier there had been the whisper of curiosity, cameras adjusting, reporters trading silent notes, now there was stillness. Not a ceremonial stillness, but a charged one. Like the moment before a verdict is read, a court officer stepped forward, carrying a long, shallow archive box sealed with a strip of embossed tamper tape. Two uniformed security officials flanked him as he placed it on the central desk before the judge. "Exhibit C," the judge announced. Trump sat back in his chair, arms folded tightly, lips pressed to a single line. The prosecutor approached slowly, unfastening the tape in silence. The lid came off with a faint pop, and inside, exactly as Captain Ashford had described it, was the slim grey folder, unmarked, except for the partially worn royal cipher in the lower right corner, a collective shift in the gallery. Eyes leaned forward. Ashford, from the witness stand, said nothing. The prosecutor slipped on white gloves. He opened the folder with care. 3 pages, no stamps, no headers. But the letterhead, visible even from a distance, was real. It bore the private seal of a foreign investment advisory firm based in the Gulf, dated 2 days before the state banquet. The prosecutor read aloud, voice level, every word clear. The correspondence detailed a proposed development agreement involving Crown estate land adjacent to a protected historical site, land under ceremonial stewardship and review. The letter outlined a diplomatic gesture, contingent upon certain permissions being secured outside of formal parliamentary review. A side note mentioned a discussion window expected to open during the state banquet, while senior American stakeholders were present. The final page included a proposed date for follow-up negotiations, signed not officially, but scribbled in initials long speculated to belong to a senior US official with direct ties to the Trump Foundation. The room didn't explode, it did something worse. It fell silent in a way that made every movement feel loud. A throat clearing, a shoe scraping. One reporter's pen tapped once on a notepad, then didn't move again. Even Trump's lawyers shifted. He sat motionless, but his jawline tensed as the document's final paragraph was read, mentioning a need for discretion, ceremonial goodwill, and an assurance that the matter remains confined to private diplomatic channels. The judge looked up slowly. "So," her voice clipped, "not merely a breach of ceremonial handling, but a circumvention of Crown advisory oversight." Trump's lead counsel stood abruptly. "Your Honour, I object to the assumption." "Object later, Mr. Coleridge," the judge cut in. "Right now, we are not dealing in assumption. We are dealing in records." No one looked at Ashford. But somehow, everyone was aware of him, still seated, still composed, his hands lightly resting on the edge of the bearskin hat beside him. No smirk, no reaction, just stillness. And that was more powerful than any outburst could have been. Because in that moment, in a courtroom halfway across the world from the land Trump once governed, it wasn't a headline or a press leak that had brought the silence. It was a single folder, and the man who chose not to look away when it quietly disappeared. The gavel didn't strike. The judge simply closed her folder, set her glasses down, and said, "This hearing is adjourned for the day. We will resume tomorrow at 10 sharp. And that was it. No gasps, no chants, no flashbulbs, just the creak of benches, the rustle of papers, and a crowd moving not with chaos, but with caution, as though the air itself had changed. Donald Trump rose slowly, his legal team tightening around him. He spoke to no one. Cameras tried to catch his eyes, but he never raised them past the edge of his collar. He walked out of the chamber in silence, the heels of his shoes echoing too loud on the polished floor. Captain Rowan Ashford remained seated. He waited until the gallery had thinned and the officers had begun to move toward their posts. Then he stood, carefully placing his bearskin beneath his left arm once again. A court officer met him near the exit hall. No words passed between them, only a nod. The kind you give a man you'd once assumed was part of the furniture, but now saw as something else entirely. Ashford walked alone down the central corridor, passing portraits of judges, monarchs, and long-forgotten legal figures. At the grand front doors, the wind outside had picked up. Evening rain misted over the top steps of the Old Bailey. A light drizzle, cold and clean. Ashford paused, adjusted the line of his collar, and stepped outside. Cameras waited at the bottom, not shouting, not lunging, they just clicked. But even louder than the clicks was what came next. A London Metropolitan Police constable, posted at the curb, stood upright as Ashford passed, and raised his hand in a quiet, precise salute. Ashford returned it with a fractional nod, then kept walking. Not toward a car, not into a statement, just forward, into the rain, into history. A scarlet figure moving quietly through a city that had, for one rare moment, remembered that silence, when chosen, can be deafening. What would you have done in Captain Ashford's place? Would you have stayed silent to protect tradition? Or spoken up, knowing the entire world would be watching? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story as shocking and quietly powerful as we did, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you don't miss what's coming next. Share this video with someone who still believes protocol is just theatre, and show them what happens when it isn't. More videos are now appearing on your screen. Watch those next if you want more real moments where tradition meets truth. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same channel, with a brand new story.